Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Burrows. I'm our marketing coordinator here at Kids and Company. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to welcome our speaker, Lisa Del Cole, the board president of Toronto Pflag. Hello, and welcome to Kidco Talks. During today's talk, we are going to explore foundational 2SL LGBTQI plus languages and concepts, inclusive parenting practices, and how to navigate or support a coming out conversation. Webinar participants, we will have the Q&A function open, so if you want to ask any questions throughout the presentation today, I'll be monitoring it. So if there's anything that comes up in the moment, I will let Lisa know, or we will save them until the end when we have time. So if you have any questions throughout, just leave them anonymously in the Q&A function. Lisa, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily, and thank you all for having me in. Thank you for spending your time with me. I appreciate that. I know probably most of you are on your lunch hour, and I really do appreciate you using it for this time together. I'm going to share my screen out, and as Emily said, I am very happy to take questions throughout, and Emily will be monitoring the chat. So, whoops, I am sharing the wrong screen. Hold on, let me show you the presentation. But anyway, yes, please do put your questions in the chat, and I'll answer them as I can as we go along. So I'd like to start just today. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of Toronto Pflag, how I came to Pflag, a little bit about my story. I'm going to do a little bit of level setting. I want to talk about that big long initialism that you see in the middle of the screen there. We will talk about coming out, both from the kids' perspective and the parents' perspective, the power of allyship, and things that you can and should be doing. So let's get started with the overview of Toronto Pflag. So we are an organization that is well over 50 years old. I cannot give you a specific date because it started as a grassroots organization back in the early 70s. There were two gay guys that met who both happened to have supportive moms, which was not super common back then. And they went, hey, we should introduce our parents. And they did. They introduced their parents, and the parents said, hey, we should get together, support this community, support other parents. And so it started, with meetings in living rooms and basements and things like that, and just kind of grew into the organization that it is today. So we've been offering all volunteer support. We have no paid staff for well over 50 years. And the support that we provide takes the form of support meetings. And you see on the screen there, we have a number of different meetings that we run each month. We've got a general support meeting that happens. Anybody is welcome to that one. We have one that's online, and we meet in person as well. And there is a meeting specifically for dads. It's called Dad's Night Out. We have another meeting that is specifically for parents of transgender kids called Transceptance. And there is also a support group for the trans, feminine, non-binary community. So there's a lot of different support. Those are the support meetings. We also offer phone support. You see the phone support, the phone number there. We answer that phone 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That has also been going on for well over 50 years. And anybody is welcome to call that line. And we do these workshops. We provide free workshops. We're an official partner for the TDSB. Those workshops are free. So we reach out to kids. We also do parent groups. I want to put this out to the parents in the audience. If you want us to come into your school, reach out through our website. You can ask your school administrators to have us in, or we will also come and meet with parent groups individually. So if you would like to have us do this presentation, we can easily, as you see, do them virtually. You want to get a group of parents together, have your parent council do one of these sessions, we will do those for free as well. Our corporate presentations, like this session that I'm doing today, our corporate partners or our corporate clients are the ones that actually fund the sessions or the work that we do with fees for these sessions. So this is a little bit about Toronto Pflag. I understand that there may also be some people attending from the United States, and you may be aware that Pflag also exists in the United States. It started roughly at the same time. We're not completely affiliated, but the mission is the same. In fact, Pflag exists all over the world. So anybody who is looking for assistance, help, education, Google Pflag and just find the chapter closest to you. So how did I come to do this work? Well, I am the very proud parent of 24-year-old twins, one of whom came out to me back in 2015 when they were about 14 years old. And when they came out to me, it was a little bit overwhelming and it was a little bit scary because my kiddo came out to me as queer, as trans, and that was back in 2015. And all I knew about this community was the awful stereotypes and jokes and things that I had heard it. And I thought, man, I don't want that for my kid. I want my kid to be safe. I also want to be able to advocate for my kid. Remember, they're still 14 years old. So all the parents in the audience understand your kids are kids for quite a long time. You still have to advocate on their behalf at school, in doctor's offices, on their sports teams, or whatever extracurriculars they're doing, even within your own family, right? So I knew I needed education and support. So I turned to my local PFLAG chapter. We were living in the United States at the time, as a matter of fact, in Oklahoma. And it was another year before I met another family like ours, before I met another parent of a trans kid. And I can tell you that was a pretty kind of, it was a scary, lonely time. I didn't have anybody to, I mean, obviously I had friends to talk to, but nobody who really got it because there was nobody else that I knew in this same situation. So once I got my feet under me, I stayed on with Oklahoma City or PFLAG Oklahoma City to help other parents, to help the organization grow, just because I remember what it felt like not to have that support, not to have that community. And you'll hear this from a lot of PFLAG parents. This is why we stay on. We remember how it was and how grateful we were to have the help that we got from PFLAG. So that's why, that's how I got involved. I am happy to say that my kid is thriving. They live here in Toronto, not with me, but they're in not they don't live exactly with me, but like they're in the Toronto area, and doing just great. They found their community, they found their feet, they are thriving. So that's a little bit about how I came to PFLAG, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about my journey or what things were like. Again, feel free to ask the questions. So I want to start by addressing this acronym that you see on the screen here, 2S, LGBTQIA+. A lot of these you're going to understand that you've already been hearing them, but I'm going to run through them quickly. Two-Spirit, 2S. That is a fairly recent addition to the initialism, and in Canada, it's used by the federal government. They use that in their initialisms when they're referring to the community, as do a lot of other organizations, and we have followed suit. The reason that we put 2S at the beginning of our initialism is to acknowledge the Indigenous population that was here before any of us other settlers got to North America, right? Two-Spirit is the term that those of us who are not part of the Indigenous community, that's the term that we can use to refer to anybody who does not belong to that gender binary, either male or female, straight, the general, what we refer, what most of the population is. Obviously, the Indigenous population is broad, it is diverse, and many languages, many cultures within that. So each of those will have their own terms, but Two-Spirit is the broad general term that those of us outside of our Indigenous populations will use to refer to that community. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, I think everybody is pretty familiar with. Transgender, I will define a little bit, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but quick definition, transgender just refers to those who do not identify with the sex that was medically assigned to them at birth. And as I said, I'll go into more detail about that. The Q stands for queer or questioning. And queer is an umbrella term that has been embraced by the community. It used to be a slur. It used to be very offensive. And so with that said, I do want to let those in the audience know, if that term bothers you, please raise your hand or put it in the chat or something, and I will not use it. However, the broader community has adopted it. We just need to be careful about the context that we're using it in. But that term can refer to either your gender identity or your sexual orientation for a number of different reasons. Either the individual doesn't want to disclose, or it just refers to a number of different things, and it's just easier just to say queer rather than spell out each of the gender identities or sexual orientations that happens to apply to that individual. The Q also stands for questioning. And this is a concept that I certainly was not aware of until my kiddo came out. So people can question their gender identity or their sexual orientation at any age, honestly. And we'll talk about that as well, as to when people can be definite about their gender identity and sexual orientation. Questioning, though, is normal, it's natural. There is no one way that any of this happens. It's up to the individual. But we just acknowledge that as well. I refers to those who are intersex, and that refers to physiology. So those are people who are born, when they're born, their genitals don't match specifically male, specifically female, as we think about those, right? It is a small percentage of the population, but a legitimate part of the population, and it hasn't been really well understood until recent years. And there's been a little bit of stigma talking about that. And there should not be. So we're basically just talking about physiology here when we're talking about those who are intersex. And this has nothing to do when you're intersex. It does not determine either your gender identity or your sexual orientation. It's just physiology. Asexual refers to those who do not have physical attraction the way that we generally think about it, or that is expressed hypersexualized in the media, right? So even though that there's not that sexual attraction, those who are asexual absolutely have deep, meaningful relationships, romantic relationships, and so it just has to do with your sexual attraction. That plus refers to the fact that there are other terms that we cannot fit into an initialism, and honestly, the language is always changing. I fully expect this initialism to be changing over the next few years as we learn more, as the communities change and grow. So that plus kind of is a placeholder to say, we recognize this is going to change, and we also recognize that we cannot recognize all aspects of this community. So that's the initialism. So I've talked about a couple of terms here that I want to define. And the reason I want to define them, they may seem basic. However, I know that until my kid came out, sexual orientation, gender identity, sex and gender, I use those terms interchangeably. I thought they were the same thing. They really are not. So your sexual orientation refers to who you are physically, mentally, or emotionally attracted to. I was talking about that a moment ago when I was explaining what asexual means. And so what you see on the screen here is a number of different terms used to describe different sexual orientations. This is just a snapshot. This is not a comprehensive list, but it does give you an idea that there is more than gay and straight. Gender identity, on the other hand, refers to who you are. This is your internal sense, your own understanding of who you are as an individual. Cisgender is a term that refers to people like me. I identify with the gender that was assigned to me at birth. I was assigned female at birth. The doctor delivered me, looked between my legs and said, "You have a girl." And that aligns for me. There's been some pushback lately where people are saying cisgender is a slur or an insult. It absolutely is not. It's just a descriptor. Transgender, same thing. Is not a slur, should not be used as a slur. It's just a descriptor for those whose gender identity does not align with whatever sex was medically assigned at birth. Non-binary kind of falls under that transgender umbrella, and that refers to those who are neither male nor female. They could be a combination of both. They could identify, or not, I shouldn't say identify, they could be neither male nor female. I cannot describe what that feels like because I am not non-binary. But we do know that basically, if you think about what the term means, It just means somebody who is not on what we refer to as commonly as the gender binary. When you hear that term gender binary, we're talking about men and women, male and female. Um, for some reason, we put ourselves in these two boxes many, many years ago. We said, this is what these two boxes are. This is how they're defined. This is what these two things look like, and there is nothing else. I don't know why that happened, but it did, and it's wrong. Not because those don't exist, they absolutely do, but more than that exists, hence the term non-binary. Gender fluid refers to the fact, or refers to people whose gender identity can be fluid. This is absolutely a thing. It is not an affectation. There are some people whose gender identity is not fixed, and it can change. It depends on the individual. It can change day to day, week to week, month to month. Again, it depends on the individual. And then again, the term queer, which is an umbrella term for, it could be a multiplicity of things. So that's what gender identity is in a nutshell. And again, same as sexual orientation, I'm giving you a snapshot here. Gender identity could be a lot of different things. We cannot define it for another person. It's up to the individual, and whatever their gender identity is valid. We can't tell a person that they are not valid. So your sexual orientation and your gender identity is important to note. Neither of these things is chosen or decided. And it's really important to understand that. To those of us who are not part of the community or who aren't experiencing this, it may feel like somebody just woke up and decided that they want to be a boy or a girl. I'm putting that in air quotes, because it's not want to be, they are. They're coming to a realization, maybe after a period of questioning. Some people know definitively there are, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but at a very young age, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, kids can know. And they will say, oh, no, wait a minute, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, or I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, or you know what, this doesn't feel right at all, and they don't have the words yet. But they can know very early. Others may just feel like there's something subtly out of place and they don't know what this is, and it takes them some time to come to the realization of what their gender identity or their sexual orientation is. All of this is normal and natural. All of this has always existed, and there is no one path to any of this. But just to drive home the point about the fact of whether or not it's a choice or that we can influence somebody's gender identity or sexual orientation, we cannot. It's an innate part of who they are. They can reveal it to us, but we can't choose it. So this always makes me kind of smile when I read it, because when you think about it, there are people who say, well, I can't have my kids reading those books, it's going to influence them. Well, all of the gay kids who were reading books about straight characters are still gay. Right? Reading those books did not turn them straight. So clearly it can't work the other way around. I did define cisgender and transgender, and it's important to note that neither of these is either related to or influenced by your sexual orientation. That's why I wanted to define those two things separately off the top. They are separate things. Now, there's a correlation. The majority of the population is cisgender and straight, right? But that doesn't mean one causes the other. Those two just happen to occur in the majority of the time. But neither of them defines or influences the other. I also talked a little bit about the term non-binary, which basically I covered those first two bullets there. And that third bullet really resonates with me because I had never heard this term before my kid came out. But it's important to note that everything that I'm talking about today in terms of gender identity and sexual orientation, all of this has always existed. Since the beginning of humankind, there have been gay people, there have been trans people, there have been intersex people. All of this has always existed. This is the terminology may be new, and if it feels new to you, that's okay. If it feels uncomfortable to you, that's also okay. We're always, or not always, but we're often uncomfortable as we are learning new things. Um, Sit with that discomfort and figure out what it means. I will tell you that the more you learn, the more comfortable things become. But it's just important to note that all of this is normal, all of this is natural, all of this has always been around. We're just finding new language to talk about it. So, how many people are we actually talking about here? We used to think, like when we think about the broad 2S LGBTQIA plus community, actually, I'm going to check the chat, so I want to know if I can say queer. So if it doesn't bother anybody, excellent, thank you. So we used to think that it was 1 in 10. We now know that it's actually closer to 1 in 4 that are part of this community. And I'll give you a bit of a breakdown here. So this is a study that was done back in 2017, has since been corroborated by multiple other studies. But this one was done in Canada. And this is this particular question, this graph comes from a question that was basically asking people, are you part of this community? Not even what part, but just, are you part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community? So you can see on the far left, 13% raised their hand and said, yes, I'm part of this community. So that tracks with roughly that 1 in 10 that we used to think that it was. But when you look at the breakdown on the right side of the screen there, the younger cohort, 18 to 34, they self-identified at a rate of 26%. And then those older, it drops significantly, as you can see, to 8%. And there's a number of different reasons for this. So that younger cohort has grown up, has come of age in a time when, first of all, we know a lot more. They have access, like a lot of these people grew up with the internet, right? They have access to information that those of us who are older didn't have. They have access to information at an earlier age, and have access to more information and have access to good information. In Canada, those people are also growing up at a time when our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so for those in the States, it's the equivalent of your Constitution, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees protections on the basis of your sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. All of those are legally protected. And when we're talking about the workplace, if like this, any discrimination on those bases has legal ramifications. If somebody is being deliberately misgendered because somebody just doesn't agree, again, air quotes, with someone's gender identity, that, in fact, I did a case study for a certificate I was working on a while ago. That has legal ramifications. That has legal repercussions. So that younger cohort is growing up at least with legal protections. That said, I am going to note that we are going through a really rough patch right now. It is not utopia in any sense of the word. However, there has been progress. But then thinking about those older folks, 35 plus, when you think about, or if you know the history, when Pflag started back in the early 70s, and those two gay guys said, hey, guess what? My mom's affirming, and the other guy, well, they may not have said affirming. My mom gets it. My mom supports me. And the other kid said, yeah, mine does too. That was not the norm. That was not usual. It was a scary time to be part of the community. For those who aren't aware, Pride looks like a great big celebration, and it is. There's a lot to celebrate. Pride began as a protest. It began as an uprising at the Stonewall Inn in New York back in the early 70s, when the community just decided to fight back against the cops that were harassing them and raiding their safe spaces. The Stonewall Inn was a gay bar. And they just finally had enough. And that, it wasn't just that one night. I think that was like a 6-day uprising. It was a scary, scary time. It was a dangerous time to be part of this community. So it's no wonder that the older folks are more hesitant to raise their hand. That 26% could be higher. We don't know, because this is self-reporting. But anyway, that's the breakdown of the community in broad terms. So just to recap everything, your sex assigned at birth, that's just based on your anatomy. That's your physiology. Your gender identity is your internal sense of yourself. As my kid likes to explain it, that sex is your hardware, gender is your software. Gender expression is how you present to other people, and that can be either through, hair, clothing, makeup, name, pronouns, all of that's your gender expression. And then your sexual orientation is your physical attraction to others. Just going to check if there are any questions, Emily, do feel free to jump in if I need to. So I asked about, I mentioned that kids can know very early on their gender identity. This was not intuitive to me. When my kid came out, I said, like, are you sure? Like, how can you know? My kid was 14. They knew from a very early age that something was off, but they didn't have the language. They didn't have the concepts or the understanding, right? But they knew that what was that the water they were swimming in wasn't quite right. And the Canadian Pediatric Society, American Medical Association, the American Pediatric Society, all confirm that kids can know at a very early age that they have been assigned the wrong sex. Some people can be a lot later, but it's important to note they can know very, very early, and they do. There's a phrase: insistent, consistent, persistent. So I've met a number of people. I remember talking to a mom last year who said, my kid's been telling me for a year, like, I don't know, is this for real? That's insistent, consistent, and persistent. That kid is telling you over and over again, this is who I am. They can know. Gender policing is a term that I like to explain to parents. We all experience it, quite honestly. When I first saw this term, it really resonated with me because I remember as a kid, the gender policing that went on with regard to how long my hair could be or should be, or whether I should even play sports. The term tomboy, I refuse. It's just, because what? Sports are just for guys? No, that's not right. That's gender policing. So like it says here, it's either encouraging or discouraging behaviors or appearance based on that sex assigned at birth, right? Those boxes that we put ourselves into. For cis kids, it's, you're just reinforcing those harmful stereotypes. Boys can wear pink. In fact, pink used to be for boys. I don't know when it switched. It was like 150 years ago, something like that. But pink used to be for boys, blue was for girls. Colors are just colors, right? But when we're talking about transgender kids, when you try to enforce those gender stereotypes on somebody whose internal sense of self is not what you're trying to impose, that's harmful. Flat out, it's harmful. It can trigger something called gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is, some people experience it severely, some people don't experience it as much, but what it is it's a sense of anxiety, unease, can cause depression and a number of different things when you are forced to live as something other than who you actually are. So when we do this gender policing, and some parents do it, and not always with bad intent, right? But when our kid for years has been telling us, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, and if you're really insistent about that, and in making the kid wear clothes that don't fit or do activities that they don't really like, it increases that anxiety. It can increase depression and a number of different things. It can be very harmful. I'll give you some stats in a moment about this.
And Lisa, just before
Yeah.
we move on, we have one question here in the chat that
Sure.
I'd like to ask. It says, my daughter started saying that she was a boy around the age 2-3. We always tried to be open, not judgmental, and she brought it up from time to time until about 5. She is about to be 7 and it no longer comes up. I wonder if she's taken social cues and no longer mentions it, or if it's possible she no longer feels that way. I want to balance being supportive without leading her to a particular outcome.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thank you for that. Yeah, because you know what? Kids experiment. Cisgender kids experiment. And that's a totally valid experience that your kiddo had. and it's not uncommon. Kids try on different personas, different personalities. You know, exactly what your kiddo is describing there. The fact that you are attuned to it and just paying attention, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. Your kid will let you know. Your kid will let you know. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope that that's a because I didn't recognize this either early on in my journey. But yeah, everybody explores. And kids can explore at a young age. So yeah, just keep an eye out for it, because sometimes, you know, kids will say there's also, we won't get into this a lot today. You may have heard the term detransitioning, and this is something else that's being used as a fear tactic. That, oh, what if my kid changes their mind, or what if they regret it later on? Um, that is, first of all, a very small percentage of the population, the transgender population, but also it's important to note that a lot of times people who do recant or detransition, oftentimes, most times that we know right now, mostly it's because it's just too hard to actually live their truth because of the discrimination and rejection that they face. Not saying that this is your kid's situation, by the way, but just saying that, like, as you can see, it's complex, it's nuanced, but kids exploring is totally normal and natural. You know, even if your kid asks you to use a different name or different pronouns, it doesn't hurt anything to do it. And if they decide, yeah, that feels good, then, you know, that's something to explore. If they say, yeah, you know what, just go back to the old one, that's fine too. It didn't hurt anything, right?
And then here's just a another question along the same lines here. My son also said at a young age he was going to marry a boy, but now he dates girls as a teen. So to the same point, just asked, would you recommend that we as parents bring it up from time to time or wait or allow our children to?
Yeah, if your kiddo's dating, then I'm assuming he's a teenager. Yeah, let him bring it up to you. Because it's really, again, it's not really hurting anything. And it's interesting. I've had conversations with other parents, other P5 parents, about the fact that going through this journey with our kids, we are now looking at ourselves and looking at our thoughts and feelings and experiences as we were growing up. And honestly, I'm thinking that this sexual orientation, like just the male or female, I think it's squishier. You know, when I look back at, you know, I kind of had crushes on girls, and I'm like, okay, so am I maybe bi? Am I pansexual? I don't know. I mean, at this point in my life, I really don't care. It doesn't matter much to me. But if it's not causing discomfort, if it's not causing pain, confusion, or whatever, I would just say, you know, wait. If your kid has something to share, they will share it. That was actually a quicker answer to your question. So I'm going to talk briefly about coming out. Coming out to parents is really not easy. Parents, you are the most important person in your kid's life. And I can tell you, as a very socially progressive person, my kid was nervous coming out to me, even though we had had talks about stuff like this. And they knew, or I assumed that they knew I would be accepting and affirming. It was still hard for them. So when your kid comes out, they're preparing for the most important conversation of their life, or they may be. In some families, it's no big deal. In other families, it is a big deal, and the kid is pretty nervous, right? They're on tenterhooks. They're really, really hoping that you're going to be okay with this. However it is they tell you, oftentimes it's just in a conversation. They may come to you though, and you're wondering what to make for dinner. You were not seeing this. I know I didn't see it coming. And your mind is elsewhere, right? And your kid is sharing this really important information. So what does this conversation look like? It could be, hey, I'm not a girl. If you look at this picture, you're assuming that the person on the left is probably a girl, right? With that ponytail, this kid's telling you otherwise, right? I'm not straight, I'm pansexual. Actually, I didn't define pansexual earlier. So for those who aren't familiar with the term, it basically just refers to the fact that somebody's attracted to people in general. It doesn't matter what their gender or gender expression or gender identity is, or their sexual orientation. They're just attracted to the person. If there are any Schitt's Creek fans in the audience, if you remember the episode where David and Stevie had hooked up the night before, and the next day Stevie was kind of wondering, well, wait a minute, I thought you. Then they were in a wine shop. They were buying wine, and she said, I kind of thought you liked red wine. They were talking around it, right? And he said, look, it's not really the wine, or not. It's not the label. It's the wine. Sometimes I like red. Sometimes I like white. Sometimes I like rosé. Right. So pansexual. That's a kind of the metaphor for that sexual orientation. And so, are you sure? I remember saying that, or not. Are you sure? But I remember telling my kid, actually, you can't know. I was 100% wrong. They did know, right? And the fact that they maybe experimented, going back to that previous question that they had, yeah, maybe you did date a boy. We experiment with a lot of things throughout our lives, right? But it doesn't necessarily determine our path forward or the sense of who we are. So this can come out of the blue. And for parents in the audience who don't have queer kids right now, or who think they don't have queer kids, I'm not saying that your kids are, but they might be. And they either may not know it, they may not have told you yet, but just know it's a larger part of the population than we thought it was. So, what are some things that you might say? These are some examples. I will learn what I need to help you. I do remember, I didn't get everything 100% right, but I do remember, like, the first thing that you can say is, I love you. I love you. You're my kid. And this does not change that. They really need to know that. Those 3 words, I love you, are the most important thing that you can say. That sense of safety is really important. You may bungle some other things. Actually, you will. I can tell you, you will. I have not met a parent of a trans kid who hasn't bungled something. But your kid knowing that you're trying and that you're there for them is the biggest thing that you can do. When a kiddo comes out, it can be hard to accept. They need a lot of parental support, and parents, you need support as well. Parents are going to want to slow things down. I know in my case, my kiddo had been researching things for a very long time. They had more information than I did. They were better versed than I was. I had to catch up to them. So it feels to parents like kids are really in a hurry, because when you recognize who you are, you want to live your life. You want to be who you are. Just think about puberty in general. Like, sometimes you can't wait to grow up and go through that and become the person that you are. Same thing with trans kids. Especially the older kids who are able to educate themselves and do the research and stuff. Yeah, they know what they want. They know what's coming next. But for those of us who weren't aware, it feels really rushed. This is one of the reasons why I like doing these presentations. I love talking to parents who haven't been through this yet, because you have an opportunity to think about it in advance. It may never happen, but at least you can think about it and say, what would I say? How do I think I would feel? You can't know till it's going to happen, but just being aware is going to help things out for sure. So what do parents need? I also like doing this presentation in a corporate setting, because a lot of times we think about the community, and we absolutely should. When community members come out, they absolutely need support in all aspects of life. But what often gets lost is the fact that parents also need support. That first bullet, time to absorb and learn, is really important. At first, if this is a significant revelation for you, you'll need some time to process, right? And come to terms with this. We need education and resources. If there are questions about that, I've got some that I can recommend. Support from friends, family, and colleagues. I remember when my kiddo came out and they wanted to change their names and pronouns, and they said, yes, use this name and these pronouns everywhere. I was like, okay, even at work? And they said, yes. And I said, so you realize that I'm now going to have to explain this to people? And they said, do it. Okay. This was kind of early on, and I was still learning things myself. So, it was interesting. So as I was teaching others, I was teaching myself. But this is something that people don't often recognize. Community members come out, but families also come out. And that's a whole other conversation. And actually, we have these conversations in the support meetings that we run. So yeah, support's needed for family as well. Um, Grace and mercy as we process and learn. When kids change their name or their pronouns or something, there's a period of adjustment. It's going to feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's a change, right? It can also be very emotional. When we are naming our children, when we are pregnant, and thinking about this wonderful being that we're bringing into the world, names are often very, very meaningful. They may have a family history, and when a kid says, that doesn't fit me, I need this other, I'm choosing this name and these pronouns, it can feel like rejection. Um, it's not, it feels very personal, but it's not personal, I think, in the way that we think it is. It's personal to the kid. I saw a meme one time that was really put things in perspective for me. It basically said, we gave you this name until you could tell us who you are. And sometimes the name sticks, most times the name sticks, but sometimes it doesn't. And so now it's time for the kid to tell us who they are. We need the ability and confidence to advocate for our kids. And when your kiddo first comes out, and if you're not either aware or confident or whatever, it's a scary time because you have to hit the ground running as a parent, right? My kid came out and I had to tell their dad. I had to tell family members. I was the one that was advocating for them, coming from a place where I didn't know what I know now. So it can feel scary. You may not know how people are going to receive the news, either in your family, in your workplace, whatever. But on top of that, your kid's your priority, right? As parents, we advocate for our kids, regardless of what happens. This is a new layer of complexity. So I want to assure the parents out there, if you're going through this and you're feeling, I don't know everything, you don't have to know everything to be a good advocate. You're going to have to educate yourself for sure. You're going to have to come up to speed, but you don't have to know everything right off the jump. Letting your kids know that you love them, letting your kids know, okay, I've got some learning to do, and prioritize what it is you need to know. You'll get there, but you don't have to know everything right away. You just need to know, your kid needs to know that you love them and that you're going to be there to protect them the best way that you can. So I want to talk about speaking to younger kids. My understanding is there are a lot of parents in the audience here with younger kids. I'm so envious of you because to me, it's so much easier to have these conversations. Younger kids are so accepting. If you just make it part of your normal casual conversations, you may already be doing this right now. We've been talking about, for a long time, Canada has had marriage equality. Anybody can marry anybody. So you may already be socializing with families with two dads, two moms, or whatever other combination there are. It's limitless, right? And your kids may already be seeing that, which is awesome. When we're talking, presenting messages of inclusion, I'm also going to include the language that we use. We should be, in general, trying to use gender neutral language if we can, just from an equality point of view. I am old enough that I remember when city councilors were called councilmen. I remember when that changed. That's just one example. We now talk about firefighters, etc. It's just more inclusive. Finding books with positive messages. Your library has a ton of stuff, I guarantee it. Talk to your librarian if you need some guidance, but there's a lot of really great stuff out there with positive messages. And take advantage of those teachable moments. There may be something that comes up in a movie or a TV show that you're watching. There may be a billboard, or it's all around us. And you can just kind of, point things out and go, oh, hey, yeah, that's kind of aren't they a cute couple? And maybe they happen to be a same-sex couple, or you may not know, right? They may be both androgynous. There are ways that you can send those positive messages. And again, just reminders that you love your kids exactly as they are. And here, language is kind of important. We used to say, tell your kids you love them no matter what. Don't say that. No matter what implies that there's something wrong. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a part of this community. So I love you exactly as you are. Who the person that you become, I love that person, right? However, and I'm being a little awkward here, but like, whatever language that you use for your kid, as long as they know that you are accepting and that you love them for who they are, that's the important thing. So again, I want to give you some stats with regard to language now, and I'm going to focus in on trans kids. So trans youth have really, really high rates of depression, thoughts of suicide, and actual actions, suicidal attempts, right? It is like at least 3 times the rate of cisgender kids. When we use a kid's chosen name and pronouns, and when they've got at least one adult in their life who is affirming, look at the decrease. That's a 71% decrease in depression symptoms, 34% decrease in thoughts of suicide, and look at the decrease in suicide attempts, 65%. All those kids were saving just by using names and pronouns. That is how important a name and a pronoun is. So whatever discomfort that we might be feeling when we are getting used to a new name and pronoun, it is nothing compared to what our trans kids are feeling when they are misgendered. My own kid told me that when they get misgendered, they feel a like this sharp pain in their chest. It's physical. And I've heard that from a number of trans people. I don't want to cause anybody that pain. Certainly don't want to cause that pain to my kid. So yeah, I'm going to get over it. And I will tell you, as somebody who's gone through this, it gets easier. It just becomes your norm. There are times, depending on the situation, my kids' pronouns change depending on where they are and how safe they feel, right? And I've had to ask them, so when do you want me to use, either of these pronouns? But there are times, like during this presentation, I didn't even think about it. It's just, they wanted they, them, like forever. And that's just what we use in the family, because that's what my kid wants. And I don't even think about it now. And sometimes I confuse people because wait a minute, are you talking about both kids or one kid? Oh, no, I'm just talking about my one kid. And I forgot that, the pronoun is just that natural and normal now. This is another graph showing the importance of either parental or teacher support. Like if you've got affirming adults, again, look at the difference. Those dark squares are for kids who have parental support, right? And the lighter bars are for parents who are not supportive. And look at how high those rates are for depression, suicide ideation, and attempts. Look at, especially those suicide attempts, look at the difference. 40% of kids on the street are homeless youth, are homeless because their parents rejected them because they're queer. That's the number one reason that they give. This is how important you all are. I'm sure you knew that anyway. I'm just driving the point home. You don't have to be perfect to be affirming. It's also important to note, and I think we all know, not everybody is an ally. That picture that you see is from the Million Kid March that was at Queen's Park a couple of years ago. It was, honestly, it still makes me really uncomfortable to see the hate being spewed. And the thing is, those parents don't see themselves as hateful. They don't see their language as being hateful, but what they're demonstrating is rejection. And all I could think of at that march, we were there, and I could, I was doing an interview and they said, what would you say to those parents? And if I would like to say to them, listen, your kids hear what you're saying. And if your 3, 4, 5, 6, 10-year-old, whoever you're bringing to that rally, sees the signs you're holding and hears the language you're using, and they're queer, imagine how they feel living in your house. This is why we talk about how important language is and the way the attitudes that we demonstrate at a young age. I mean, chances are most kids are cis. Chances are in this audience, most of you are not going to have queer kids, but you never know. What messages are you sending to your kids? Also, the messages we give to our kids are the messages that they then in turn send out into the community. Bullying at school is really bad. I know schools do their best to try to keep kids safe, but it is not safe for trans kids these days. It's really hard. Those kids learn that somewhere, right? So some of the common disinformation that there is, the fact that it's a social contagion. It may feel like that because all of a sudden all these kids coming to puberty are saying, well, wait a minute, I'm trans. It's not a contagion. Who would choose to live a life that is harder, a life that puts you in harm's way, right? As puberty hits, their body is going to change in ways they don't want it to change, and kids speak up. That's why we see so many kids around the age of puberty coming out. Puberty blockers are 100% safe and reversible. So first of all, young kids are not being prescribed their puberty blockers without their parents' notice. They are certainly not having medical or surgical transition. And puberty blockers have been used for cisgender kids for, I think it's like 35, 40 years now. We know that they're safe. We know that they're reversible. It's being used. In fact, it still is used to treat precocious puberty in young kids at the age of 4, 5, 6, who are starting puberty. That's way too young. We have puberty blockers to stop that until they get to an age where it's appropriate for them for puberty to kick in. Stop the puberty blockers, and things continue as they should. Doctors are not performing surgery on kids. They do not. Transitioning for kids is social, like I was talking about before: hair, clothing, name, pronouns, that type of thing. We talked about how they can be confident in their gender by the age of 2, 3. When they start talking and telling you, they can know that for sure. And something else to let parents know: kids will often test out names and pronouns with other people before they tell you. This is not a rejection of you. This is an indication that you are so important that they want to make sure they get it right before they tell you. Because, like I said, even though I am very accepting and very liberal, my kid was nervous to tell me as well. So what are things that you can do? Demonstrate your acceptance for sure. Educate yourself. Start now. You don't have to wait to have a queer kid to know about this stuff. In fact, it's probably helpful for you to know now. You could be an ally. It's important to understand the issues, find legitimate resources, serious resources. Try to stay out of the disinformation if you can. Find reliable resources for the information that you're looking for. That last bullet, I almost want to pull it. It makes me laugh every time. Discover queer artists, literature, and music. You're already doing that. Even if you didn't know it, even if you're not doing it intentionally, we're all doing it anyway, because the arts are so represented. The queer community is so represented in the arts. And as I've been talking about, demonstrating your acceptance. Use your child's chosen name and pronouns, even if it doesn't feel good, even if it doesn't feel comfortable right away. It's really, really important. So I'm going to stop there. I know I'm coming just about at time. I want to leave some time for some questions. So I'll stop. There's the share. I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to take any questions that there might be.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for your talk today. This has been so helpful and engaging. We have a few questions. I know we're low on time, so we'll try and get to a couple of them. The first here is, are there any books or resources you can recommend for helping kids better understand these different concepts?
For kids, I don't have kids. You know what I have? I have stuff for parents. This is why I was referring you to your librarian. Like, there's, what is it? Tango Makes Three is a picture book for kids about the two dad penguins. There's a lot of stuff out there for kids. One that I do want to recommend for parents, if you want to put it in the Q&A, I don't think I have access to the chat. There's one called Gender Your Guide, and it's by a gender researcher at Queen's University whose name is Lee Ayrton, Airton. That book came out, I think, in 2018, and they just recently reissued it. So Dr. Ayrton is a non-binary academic, and it's a fantastic resource. It goes into way more detail than I just did, but it's written in a really engaging way. It's a really easy read, and they reissued it just lately to include a section on language and how to talk about all of this stuff. So that is one that I am highly recommending these days.
Thank you.
There's also a documentary that I will recommend because it's family friendly, and you can use it to educate yourself, your kid, family members if you have to talk about this. It's called Gender Revolution, and it's a documentary that was done. It's a little bit older, but the info is still valid. Katie Couric did this in collaboration with National Geographic. So it's well done. It's a good resource. It's 90 minutes long. You can find it on Facebook. So you can watch it for free. And I think it's also streaming on Disney Plus. Hey, if Disney is doing it, you know it's family friendly, right? So that's another one that I would recommend because it talks about it, like it goes through a lot of the stuff that I was talking about, basic information, but in more detail.
Thank you for that. We can include those resources in the follow-up email all registrants will receive as well. Here is another question. Oh, also another comment from the chat that Love Makes a Family is a great book to introduce different types of families to children.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then there's also here a comment saying we can't see the chat. We've kept the Q&A anonymous, so we will include those resources in the follow-up email. And then here is a question. How can I advocate for more inclusive practices in my child's school?
So as I mentioned earlier, Toronto Pflag is an official partner of the Toronto District School Board, but we'll come into any school, even if you're not a part of the TDSB. But let them know that, these sessions are available. I mean, your kids aren't going to get this session that I'm doing here today, but we do talk about gender identity, sexual orientation. We can do that. But just, especially for parents who don't have queer kids, if you start raising this, you're helping other parents, by the way. Just letting you know, because as a parent of a queer kid, you may not feel safe doing that. You don't want to put your kid at risk. So I'm just going to put that out there to other parents, and just say, hey, I heard that we could have these sessions. Obviously, it's not going to happen this school year, but hey, queer kids are queer like 365 days out of the year. We can come in September, October, November. Ask to have us come in.
Thank you for that. And we have reached our time, so I'll get us wrapped up. But if you do have any additional questions, please, you can contact us at our Kids and Company email responding to the follow-up email as well, and we will try to get your questions answered as well. So hold on to them. Thank you so much, Lisa. Again, this has been so insightful and very interactive. It's great information and tips and tricks for all of our attendees today. And thank you everyone for coming on. And thank you for your questions in the Q&A. It's always great to be able to have some live conversation and questions. So thanks everyone for that. I'd like to remind everyone that there'll be a recording sent out shortly, as well as the other helpful resources we've talked about today from Pflag and more, and also to help you find Pflag. As you leave the webinar, there's going to be a quick survey popping up. So if you take a quick minute just to give us and Lisa some feedback, we would really appreciate it. Lisa, thank you again, and we will see everyone next month for our next Kidco Talk.
Happy Pride. Remember, Pride's this weekend. Come down and see us.
Yes, happy Pride. Thank you.
Bye.